have Bob Hamrick now. Thank you so much, Jan Zabriskie, Mayor Zabriskie, for that. And yeah, I think that's useful. We're live streaming, and
perfect. Amplification here.
And if you want, you can.
We have some slides, right? Great. So I'm Bob Hambrecht. Allotrope Partners. We call ourselves a merchant bank. We have a consulting arm, and we also work on making direct investments in what we call project development platforms. We look at decarbonization opportunities that tend to aim towards the infrastructure problems, and we often build. We try to spin out opportunities where we can build companies that will build these projects. I've spent the last 5 years focused on this opportunity around what started as a cellulosic ethanol technology with a French company called Axens. Axens is one of the larger petrotech companies internationally, and they've had a technology they've been working on for 15 years to take wood waste and turn it into ethanol. We also have a large EPC engineering contract partner. Sumitomo has been our partner to this stage of the engineering, and we're working with Sumitomo to fund the third and final stage of engineering, which will allow us to then go to what's called FID, final investment decision, which would be the big $500 million project to actually build the plant. So we're about 2/3 of the way through the engineering. Our first plant will be in Anderson, California. We are going to use in the neighborhood of 450,000 tons of biomass, and we will produce ethanol, lignins, RNG, and we'll have a CO2 stream as well. The concept is to build a series of these plants and really become a driver of demand for the low-end biomass, forest biomass that needs to be removed as part of any forest health efforts in the West, and really nationally and internationally ultimately. The technology this kind of describes the technology very quickly. You bring in the biomass on one end. It goes through what's a first step of what is a lot like a pulp mill or a steam implosion process, where you take the material that comes in at a pretty large sized chip, but after the steam implosion, it comes out looking like coffee grounds. And that releases some of the sugars from the wood. But the lignins that surround the wood, that are the big part of the wood, the hard part of the wood surrounding the cellulose, requires a second step of an enzyme that breaks the lignins down to release the sugar. So the second stage, you have the enzymes and the yeast working together in the same pot. So you're having the sugars released, fermented into alcohol, and that stream of water comes out, and the ethanol is removed. You have a wastewater stream that you can put into a digester, and you capture the methane waste stream out of that. So you have the ethanol, you have the RNG, the lignins that come out of that. Originally, we thought we're just going to go into a boiler and create the heat and electricity that's needed to run the process. But the real big news for us over the last 6 months is it's become clear that those lignins can be used for bioplastics. And that's a big deal for us, because it increases the returns on the process. And it really means we're a biochemical opportunity here, not just ethanol. And the ethanol it was still an attractive opportunity. It would probably ultimately, the first plant, the ethanol will end up in a gasoline, blended into fuel for cars. But longer term, sustainable aviation fuel is going to need a lot of low carbon ethanol as part of decarbonizing aviation. But the lignins, we're really just still getting our arms around what this means. But we think we can sell those lignins at a price less than the polyethylene it'll be replacing, and still be very profitable to us. So this becomes a huge opportunity. It really changes the dynamics of what we're doing quite a bit. The fact that we now have lignins really changes our revenue streams and really makes our pitch to our bankers very different. Ethanol, it's very important when you're doing a project financing like this that you have a strong guaranteed revenue stream, so that you can borrow 60-70% of the cost of the project and use debt financing to support it. And the lignins are particularly important because you can hedge their pricing long-term against oil prices, and you can actually lock in that revenue stream, and that makes the bankers very happy. ethanol and some of the other credits that we were working were helpful, and we did get a USDA loan guarantee program. We're accepted into the loan guarantee program because they believe in the project, but the lignins are really the new piece that changes the dynamics of what we're doing quite a bit. And then I guess the last piece, this is at the site in Cottonwood. There's actually a biomass energy plant right there off of Highway 5, and we're kind of catty corner to them. And we'll have a couple large piles of wood, and then this is the facility based here. It's about 15 acres here, and then we have another 50 acres around that. There'll be wood storage and wood piles. Um, Another good news piece for us in the environment right now is clearly very difficult for a lot of programs. I wouldn't want to be in the hydrogen space right now, but actually we have received grants from the USDA. The federal government likes biofuels. They like the activity in the forests that we're promoting. And at the state level, CEQA, there's been some CEQA changes to those rules that we think will help accelerate the permitting that we're doing. So that's very quickly what we're doing. I'm happy to talk about it more. It can go down a lot of different rabbit holes, either around the technology or how we're financing it, or kind of how we're going to be driving the forest management work. But I think I'm probably under 8 minutes, aren't I?
Yeah, we have a couple minutes, so I think we could entertain a question.
Would you? I can answer them now or after the fact.
Well, how about let's hop into we'll hop into the next one. You did answer my biggest question, is how the current legislation is addressing that. But anyway, yeah, let's hop to we've got Matt Setti, Nevada Environmental Consulting, and if you can hand off that mic there for him, and then we'll do questions at the end.
Hi, my name is Matt Setti. Does this work? Is this on?
Yeah,
You can just clip it to yourself. So my company was formed about 10 years ago, and I'm both a licensed LTO timber operator in California doing small restoration projects. Last couple of years, I've done about 3,800 acres of logging. And what I do is I aggregate private landowners together. And we also do the CEQA, NEPA, we're qualified biologists, hydrologists, foresters. I have a company of about 10 people, and then I have a network of other timber operators, small guys that go out and actually execute the work. We're kind of at that nexus between biomass products that actually cost people to dispose of the wood, either through the concept of there's not enough there to make trucking worthwhile, and so timber operators aren't going to take it, or there's not enough there to chip and send to a biomass plant because the volume and the reliability of a small project like that doesn't overcome the cost of the trucking that it takes to get it there. Or in my case, I'm on the east side in the Great Basin, so I do a little bit of work in the Plumas and down south, but most of my work is these large biomass products on the other side where it doesn't have an alternative commercial product for it. And so those create an interesting dynamic on what do we do with those woods. We give away thousands and thousands of board feet a year to anybody that'll take it, as long as it's not, commercialized and costs the project tax revenue or some other payment out on that. And it usually has to go down to how that process gets permitted. So when we do have these larger organizations that are like fire safe councils in the communities that you work in, and homeowners associations and areas that have predictable biomass yields, we really need to foster a conversation about how do we take those and make those products for emerging alternative wood technologies as a means of that sustainability. We can't either have just commercial operations or non-commercial operations. We have to have a feed stream to organizations like these others that include those other biomass uses that otherwise just cost citizens money to do maintenance on the property. So that's kind of where I am on it. We're here to kind of talk about any avenue of that stream, from the contractor side to the kind of the environmental consulting firm that puts together the projects. And then we also do, our biggest element is the restoration. Planted 250,000 trees in the last few years. I put an order in with CAL FIRE and Forest Service this year for 90,000 trees, and I got 12,000 trees. So we've been investing in a new seed farm. My biologists are out building a new seed bank. And I think that's the future of what we have to see when we see a systematic destruction of other elements of our governmental system that feeds the forestry network. We need an alternative on the private side that can sustain political upheaval as far as how to create sustainable forest practices. So thanks. There you go. Hopefully I made up time for you.
Everyone thinks I talk a lot or something.
All right, David Mercer, thanks for being here. Philip Blix is also partner in this Alpenglow sawmill project. So, and let me, I need to jump to and you should be able to advance that way.
Start.
Oh yeah, I guess.
There we go. So I'm David Mercer, here to talk about Alpenglow Timber. So we're building a new sawmill facility about 3 miles north of Truckee, up 89. These are some of our partners and some of our funders. We've gotten grants from the state and the USDA Forest Service, and the Sierra Business Council has helped us a bunch throughout this whole process. A little about me. I was born in Tahoe City, grew up in Olympic Valley. I'm a licensed timber operator. I'm a commercial helicopter pilot in my previous life. Went to school to be a mechanical engineer. Ski racing is a big part of my life. My kids are ski racers. I was a ski racer. Skiing is, what we do when we're not working. So I also operate Crosscheck Services. I've been a licensed timber operator for about 20 years. We run low impact logging equipment, doing forest restoration work throughout the Truckee Basin, North Tahoe. We work for the Land Trust, we work for the Nature Conservancy, we work for California State Parks, we work for the Forest Service, we work for the NFF, we work for any of the larger landowners, the airport. We've treated Waddell, we work for North Star, Martis Camp. We thin forests, and I like to believe that our basic primary goal is to grow bigger trees. We have way too many small trees because of logging practices for the last 100 years. So our problem is that when we come across forests that look like that center picture or the right picture, we need to do something with those logs. In California, there's really only one outlet for logs. It's Sierra Pacific in the Sierra range. They're also the largest landowner in the state. And when there are large fires, it always impacts Sierra Pacific ground because they coexist with federal and state ground. And when SP ground burns, they cut off everyone else's logs because they need to go log their own ground because they're a business. And so we can go for 1 or 2 or more years and not have an outlet for logs. And the other problem is that predominantly around here, we do a lot of meadow restoration work, which involves a lot of lodgepole pine, a lot of tamarack. SP doesn't take tamarack or lodgepole. So we needed to come up with a solution as to what to do with all that lodgepole because we cut a lot of it. Those decks out at our facility are all lodgepole. There's about 6 million feet of lodgepole sitting there right now. The beauty is lodgepole doesn't go bad. It's a pretty amazing species as far as pines go. So we're building a new sawmill. It's based on mills that I've toured in Europe. Europe is, they're kind of the forefront of sustainability. Each little town, anywhere there's, a forest ecosystem, the nearest town's going to have a sawmill in it, and that sawmill's been there for hundreds of years. The towns typically own the forests around them, and they are, built to be sustainable. The town takes great pride in their forests. Their forests all look like parks for the most part. They are typically, when they come here and visit us, they're horrified as to what our forests look like, and they're really horrified when you show them the waste piles, because a lot of the trees that go into our sub-merch or non-merch piles are what they would consider saw timber. It's not what we do. We take logs down to 6 inches and 10 feet in length. So we try and utilize everything we can out of the woods. But anyway, so we're building a new sawmill. We're shooting to start off at about 5 million board feet a year. It has its own integrated biomass boiler that heats the facility, and will also heat the residential housing that we're building for our employees because no one can afford to live around here. And as part of that, we are planning to build a mass timber production line to make CLT panels, because that's the best utilization of small logs. You can put a whole lot of really low merch or non-merch wood into a CLT line because you cut all the defect out of the boards as part of the process. So we are, like I said, just north of Truckee, kind of across the road from Hobart Mills. We have 124 acres that we were able to secure a few years ago. And yeah, we're surrounded by hundreds of thousands of acres of federal land, some state land. There's 50,000 acres of pine plantation that needs to be dealt with, which directly abuts us. There's no shortage of wood in our immediate vicinity. It's basic site plan. There's some other residential neighbors on this same quarter section that was subdivided back in the 60s. There was a lot of hoopla last year from the neighbors about us building on our 124 acres, but I think we smoothed all that out. So yeah, sawmill, residential housing. Does this point?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
There you go. Residential housing, sawmill, log storage, access road. This is Highway 89. Hobart Mills here. If you guys mountain bike, that's where the mountain bike parking lot is. So rendering of kind of what we're doing, residential housing. This is the mill. So we're building a mill that's going to ingest small logs predominantly because that's what we cut. And it's as automated as we can make it because labor is incredibly difficult around here. So initially we are going to process predominantly pine because that's what we cut, some fir, but mostly pine, and try and get the most grade out of every log because that's the way it pays. You can't compete with SPI selling 2x4s, framing material. You'll never get there. Just as a scale, so our facility will probably take in 15 to 20 loads a day. An average SPI mill takes in 400 loads a day of logs. So we're not doing that. We're building something that's sustainable for here. So this is the sawmill line. There's a small log line, a large log line. We do have large logs. We do deal with them. It's, we do group openings for the Forest Service, which means we mimic lightning strikes and we go cut a 2-acre clear cut to make an opening, which would then turn into a meadow in future dates. So we have large logs, but predominantly we deal with small logs. And so we are building a small log line that will take those small logs, turn them into boards. They are scanned by a computer. The computer then sorts them. They'll go to the kilns, get dried, come back, go through the planer, get sorted again and graded, and thereby we will be able to utilize the maximum value of every log because of our technology in sorting, grading, planing, and cutting. This is the next phase, which is the cross-laminated timber line. The sawmill is built to feed the CLT line. So as part of that grading, sorting, it also scans every board and knows every defect in every board, marks every board. So when it goes to the CLT side, the scanner on the CLT side cuts the defects out, runs it through the finger joiner, turns it into a board of unlimited length for the CLT side and the beam line. So that's us unloading the first chunks of sawmill. They're sitting out there. This is just an example of a small sawmill line in Europe. Pretty basic. This isn't the automated small log line, but a basic bandsaw head rig edger. And to start out, this is what we're going to produce. A lot of pine, a lot of blue stain pine. It makes for some rather beautiful interior paneling. Timbers, a lot of pine paneling and a lot of door and window material. Predominantly doors and windows are made from pine. So that's our initial outlet. Boilers, they're coming from a combination of countries. It's a Swiss company. Our boilers will ingest all of our bark and all of our mill waste, thereby heating the facility, heating the kilns. Yeah, they're super clean, very efficient, and they'll also ingest bark, which is kind of critical for us. CLT mass timber. So for those who don't understand what that is, essentially you're taking dimensional boards that you've cut all the defect out of and you're gluing them together into a cross-laminated panel. So you have boards running longitudinally, and then laterally they go into a big press, and they're glued together to make essentially a piece of plywood that's 4 to 12 inches thick, 10 feet wide, and up to 40 feet long. And then you can make these panels, and they will basically, you can build any kind of structure you want out of them. They're very fire resistant, very seismically stable, very strong. And the Austrians figured this out because they had a lot of low-grade boards they needed something to do with, and they needed to make bigger pieces of wood out of small pieces of wood, because in Europe, they don't generally have trees like we have. So that was kind of the gist of what they did and why they did it. So example of a CLT press. Actually, it's the layup. This is the press. The glue is just a latex base, like Elmer's wood glue. Little more advanced technology, but that's what it is. This is a beam line. There's a beam press. It's the same process until you get to these two devices, same boards. The beam boards are a little different because of the grade and the way they are constructed, but the production is the same. So if you can make beams, you may as well make beams and make CLT, because all the expensive equipment is at the front. The presses are just kind of you should do it because it makes economic sense if you can do the whole package. There. This is a manual layup beam line in Slovenia that I was at about a year ago. So the guy will lay up all the boards. They come out glued out of that's a planer there, but behind that is a finger joiner that's joining those boards into something that's 40 feet long. It's pretty cool technology. There we go. Yep. So that's, yeah, CLT is a great substitute for concrete and sequesters a huge amount of carbon, very durable, fire resistant, and is being adopted by all the local and state municipalities as far as the construction code goes. Cross-check, that's us. Kind of went over that. Timber operator, that's what we do. We employ about 10 people, typically year-round. And we're hoping that this will feed our ability to keep the front end going in the forest and pay our way in the forest, because the grants aren't going to last forever to keep paying us to do really expensive work in the forest. So if we want our town not to burn, then we need to come up with way better solutions than we have now. Benefits, I think I've spoken to about Alpenglow. We're going to get this one going and then see if we can get some others going around the state. It's kind of our goal. Worker housing, I spoke about that. It's about 10 jobs. And yeah, it'll help feed about 1,500 acres a year of thinning, which is about kind of what we generally do, give or take, us and probably one other contractor. These are all the people that have helped us get where we're going. I know there's a bunch of you in the room. So it's a very large rock to push up the hill.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think now we'll head to the Q&A, and if we can, you can stand or sit, whatever you're comfortable with. If you guys can come on up here, that would be great. And I think we have the.
It's here.
Oh, here, okay. Where did our ruler? Right on. All right. Any questions from the group? Jeff?
In terms of CLT and building codes and adoption of that technology, say within the town of Truckee or just broadly, what kind of progress has been made there? Because my understanding was that was kind of challenging in the past.
I can't speak to the town of Truckee code, but the state codes have adopted it. The state of California has a mandate through their state architectural office to mandate mass timber in their buildings. The UC system is building a whole bunch of mass timber buildings right now, so it is well on its way.
It's the fastest growing category of timber products out there. The market right now is slightly north of $1 billion, and it's going to 3 billion in 3-4 years. So it's like it's on a rocket ship. The challenge with CLT in general is that you basically have to design the boards, or you have to the, the manufacturing side has to be integrated with the design side, and the biggest challenge isn't actually the code. The code's been adopted almost throughout all the 50 states, or maybe we are 51. But the challenge is getting the architects to adopt it and use it and design it, and then send that plan to a CLT plant, and they have to figure out what that means and make the thing.
Right.
That's the challenge. But that's slowly, people are getting more and more comfortable and used with it. And then there's a couple plants out going up in Oregon and a little bit here too. But right now, I think people are buying stuff from Canada, and then they're buying stuff from Austria, sending it on ships to the East Coast, having it milled here, and then sending it to, throughout the country, which is kind of silly.
Yeah, I did a little research on how you might sell CLT and discovered some of the things you're describing. And I'm curious how you guys plan to then model demand and have like a constant sale for your product, since it is sort of like dependent on all these architects and other people asking you for something specific.
It's having discussions with large architecture firms right now as to what their needs are and what we can produce. So I've had a lot of long conversations with basically large architecture firms that are working on UC facilities, working on state facilities, working on large buildings. And yeah, they're sourcing their CLT components from Quebec and from Austria because there's no one here to produce them.
The state is.
But speak up, Phil, because it's not amplifying.
Yeah, so the state has created different types of clearinghouses for this too, in order to facilitate this. So if you want to build a CLT building, there's clearinghouses, educational support, all that, and then access to the mills behind it. So you can kind of work with all those resources. There's a huge amount of resources being basically thrown at this for free by the state and related agencies. So it's definitely coming. It's just a matter of, it's just adoption. SoftBank tried to do this super quick. They were like, we're going to do this in 18 months. We're going to change the world. That did not work out. But if you have a 5 to 10 year perspective, it's going to be there.
I think we got Greg and then Lizzie.
Right? Stay with the this concept. I'm been really interested in DLT, and because it doesn't use glue or doesn't use nails, and it's completely biodegradable. And I understand you're working with Paul on some of that, and I'm trying to be a case study for Berkeley to use it on a small residential model. I'm building a resort where I'm going to have people come. Would you be possible resource for me if I had a bunch of trees that need to be milled and turned into DLT, or are you exclusive with CLT?
Well, the dowel. So there's three methods of making mass timber. There's cross-laminated timber, which uses a glue to bind the wood together. There's DLT, which is a dowel laminated timber. So like essentially imagine shipbuilding, where you're pounding wooden dowels into boards to attach them together. And then NLT, which is taking boards, putting them together, and nailing them together. My view of the DLT and the NLT is that it's a whole bunch more labor. And for us to be efficient in what we are doing, the cross laminated and the beam line makes the most sense for our, yes. And Paul and I, so he's speaking about, there's a UC Berkeley structural engineer who has his passion is cross laminated timber of all various flavors. He designed some CLT housing units for us. So we've gone around and around a lot. But yes, we could certainly supply aspects of it, like the finger jointed boards, which you would still need for that production line, because you're still going to need to cut the defect out of the boards to get them to be structurally sound. But as far as the production line of DLT, I'm not sure how that would fit, because it's a lot of space.
Okay. And a question for the first speaker. I forget your name. Bob. If I may, you mentioned this byproduct, and I was talking to somebody. Buckminster Fuller had this great quote: "Is like pollution is nothing more than the resources we haven't figured out how to recycle." And you found this new byproduct that was now a major profit thing. Is that something that could also be used? Because one of the things I want to do is organic composite wood that would be more resilient to the weather that I'm facing up at 7,000 feet. Is that material something that could? I heard you use a term that led me think you were going that direction.
I haven't. We haven't investigated that in any depth at this point. I mean, the partner we're talking to here, they're really going to be using these lignins. They're going to process the lignins and use it as as an equivalent of polyethylene. So it'll go into normal plastic products. So if you're a consumer brand company and you need to decarbonize your supply chain, you'll be able to have a plastic has a 40% reduction in carbon.
But not like the composite wood that we see sometimes they use for
that's
deck.
a different one. I'm not as familiar with that space.
Okay.
It's interesting. The lignins probably could be a piece of that, because it's the hard part of the wood that, there are a lot of lignins waste streams that are looking for homes.
Hi, thanks. That was really awesome and great speakers to have different perspectives. I have two questions also, if that's okay. One was for Alpenglow, and I'm curious about. Oh gosh, now the question's gone. So I'm going back to Bob. All right, I'm gonna ask Bob's question, and then it'll come to me for Alpenglow. So at Allotrope, can you explain to us how you economically get the small woody biomass out of the forest? Because I know that's a big
It's a
problem.
big challenge.
And then with all your
Dave and I were having a conversation on that, and he's very skeptical that we can get it out. I mean, we're going to be. Well, and actually, we were in agreement. I mean, my point is, we're going to be able to pay something for the material, but we will need the state grants that are pushing. We'll cover part of the cost of the work getting done, but we won't cover it all. Particularly on our first plant, when we have to show very attractive returns. I do have a fantasy that the second or third plant, or even the first plant, once it's refinanced and the risk is reduced, and I can get investors who will take an 8 or 10% return and be happy with it. I may be able to increase the price I pay for the biomass pretty significantly. But for this first plant in particular, I have to be working with partners like maybe Anu and their REM credits, or the state grants, or the other programs that are out there paying for forest management, and we'll complement and help pay for it, but we won't cover it all to begin with.
And then on your products, is it going to be economical to get those to market? I mean, like the lignin and. I mean,
well, the ethanol will be it'll go on in a truck to a blending rack to Chico. That's the nearest ethanol blending rack where they blend gasoline and make fuel. The lignins will probably go on a train, and I think they're building a plant in the States, so I'm honestly not sure where. And the RNG will go right into a pipeline that is right there next to our facility. And as we look at other locations, being near a natural gas pipeline is super important.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Okay, I remember my question. So it's Dave, right, at Alpenglow?
Yep.
Okay, so I think I saw on a slide it was $1,700 per year in carbon revenue that you were estimating. And I'm curious how you calculated that, because, 1,700 tons of carbon benefit, but it was 2 to 5 acres or 2 to 6 acres per day that you're hoping to thin. And so using the REM, which is reduced emissions from megafire methodology, which kind of predicts where megafires will occur, and then it credits carbon based on thinning activities in those areas. I'm just curious, did you use a methodology like that to come up with your 1,700 tons per year, or how did you get that number?
You've got an expert.
No, that's good. I'm gonna have to defer to Philip on where the number came. We were talking with various people about carbon credits, and I don't honestly remember where the math came from. If it was basic tons.
no, not again. No, it was a back of the envelope to figure out if we process this many tons of timber, and that is avoided for 100 years. Basically, we turn it into lumber that gets into windows and doors. And those windows and doors hang out in those houses for 100 years. Then that's the amount of carbon embedded in those, something like that, a version of that.
I- That was a program I was mentioning to you.
Live streaming.
I think-
We're live streaming and
And I'd love to figure out how to do the carbon development side of
Back
this.
on. That's fine.
We have been trying to do the bit about the lumber mill because the carbon credits are even harder to sell. We're like, can we just sell 2x4s? We should be able to find a market for that. Find a market for carbon credits on top of that. That's how we make this from a really a fine economic investment to a really good investment, and allow us to feed back into the forest and then pay more, or offset some of the servicing costs. That's sort of if you take the whole chain, right? If you can sell the carbon credits, we can pay for the lumber, even if it's trash lumber or waste, whatever you want to call it.
It'll never cancel out.
Thank you. I think it's important that we engage the whole group here.
Yeah, we have a question here, and then I think we still need a mic up front for the speakers. Yeah.
I have a couple questions. Sorry. First one, I forget your name. I'm sorry, Matt. You mentioned that you aggregate landowners, and I'm just curious, like, in what way do you mean? Are you an actual contractor aggregating landowners that you're then doing wood removal on their properties? Are you the
Yes.
implementer?
Yeah, so most of our work is post-fire work. So we come in and in areas that don't have like an RCD that would normally take a grant to do that. What I did is I front a lot of those costs, and I handle part of that absorption because you don't get paid until the back end. And then my staff does everything from work with Farm Service Agency under EFRT programs, which are 75% cost share, establish the escrow accounts, do the land accounting. We have an aerial, build drones, do hydraulic models, pull all the permits under a letter of agency where I pull the permits in my company's name, and then we handle each prescription. So the way we got around doing that is I wrote a prescription document, submitted it to the Forest Service, they endorsed the methodology, and then we were able to line up all those different divisions of forest practices that could get funding through different sources into a process where we had a GIS-based Python script that allowed us to have a very transparent accounting system. So it's kind of a big ball of wax, but basically what we did is we treated 21 different landowners like sub-elements of the same project, and then individually funneled all the cost share funding from USDA. We're a USDA technical service provider, so handled everything from grant administration to final contracting to sign off and methodologies like that. So.
Awesome. Thanks. The next question is, I guess, more broadly for any of you, but just curious if thinking about supply for these long-term supply for these facilities is often a concern in making them pencil out to be profitable. Investors often consider that and whether they're going to invest in a facility like this. And so there's more and more talk with Forest Service and individual forests establishing long-term supply contracts, and just curious about your response to that. I know Dave, especially as like you are an actual contractor removing logs, but those contracts are often based on grant funding that can pay for the work to be done, like to the NFF that then contracts with you, and then NFF is constantly getting grants that they have to secure to do the work. Like, would having more long-term supply contracts established in multiple national forests make a big difference in the economics of any of your work penciling out?
Yes. Well, and that's where I was going to say that's where these larger programs like the G to Z programs with Forest Service are coming into play. But you have to have a player on that side of the fence on those large projects to make it economical, right? You got to have somebody that agrees with you on the appraisal values and agrees with you on how to do the job. So on public lands, if the Forest Service isn't on that side of the table, nothing's happening.
Yeah, we wouldn't have gotten to the stage we're at without some indication of long-term contracts. And we have a problem that I'm hoping is going to change, but for the moment, I can't use biomass from federal lands. That's the biofuel rules. It very clearly states that biomass from federal lands cannot receive RINs, which are federal fuel credits. There's a carve out for fire danger that right now is 200 feet from a building. There's a lot of federal land that's a lot farther than 200 feet from a building, and they've been working with the Forest Service and EPA to say, well, it should be 2 or 3 miles from any infrastructure in federal land. That if there's fire management and forest management work done, that should count. But for the moment, I'm looking at private landowners, and being in Reading means we have a deal with SPI as our key supplier. We also, about a third of our material will be from almond orchards, and because there's a third of the year where we won't be able to be in the woods. And then the last third, we have local loggers, and we'll be cobbling it together. But I'm going to need very strong contracts in place before I get final funding. A bunch of them, yeah, and the RCDs, and particularly once the federal land rule changes, I feel really good about the relationships we have up there. But turning them into long-term contracts, I know you probably follow the CalFrame is trying to build different versions of that. And the one up in my area is really focused on building like sort of a public-private entity that could act as kind of a backstop or insurer for long-term contracts. And we're right in the thick of that.
No, it's we were in discussions with the Forest Service. Forest Service had teamed up with the Nature Conservancy, and the Nature Conservancy was helping the Forest Service with a potential 10-year IDIQ IRTC, which is an indefinite description, indefinite quantity, integrated resource timber contract, essentially. So, yeah. And it's still in the works. We'll see where that ends up. But it was a 10-year sort of Central Sierra crest. Well, yeah, we'll see. We gave feedback to it. We'll see where it goes. But yes, it would be great to have something more than a 3-year Forest Service contract, which is the typical. It's usually 3 with 2 1-year extension options. Is what a typical Forest Service contract goes with. But we also have a lot of history for us working for all the other entities in the basin and in the Truckee Basin that own land. We generally are not short on things to do. So for me, the banks don't like that as an answer, but we also have a 20-year track record of treating acres. So, but yes, a 10-year federal contract, which the local ranger here and the ranger at the Sierraville district and the Tahoe supervisor, they're all actively, they know that we need to come up with a better solution because they want to see their acres treated. And they also want to see acres treated that we can treat cost effectively so we can get more acres treated.
Thanks, I got it.
I think you may have answered at least part of my question. So first I was going to follow up on Lizzie's point, but let's do that separately because it's more technical and probably will bore everyone. But on the wild,
that'll be during happy hour.
yeah, let's do that during happy hour. As just putting my like pure resident hat on, like someone who lives in the area, has been here for decades. It's like, everyone's really scared about wildfire. So like if you were to explain how you coordinate with the counties and the state on, wildfire like prevention activities, like how does this all coordinate with what they're doing and contribute to that in like a strategic way? Like is it, location based, like there's a lot of fire risk here, so this is where we're going to be working? Or how does that all work? I know that's a very basic question, but that's my like.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that that's looked at. On the federal side, the Forest Service is going to look at their forests of highest risk inside the urban interface. And those are the lands that get treated first and usually thin the most so that there's some sort of a buffer between the other federal land that's not treated and the subdivisions. On the local level, because there's county level too, but say on the non-federal side, then there's various plans that are put together with various long acronyms that essentially identify where the highest hazard is and come up with a treatment plan for those areas. So like Olympic Valley has one where they had retired CAL FIRE forester and another consultant come up with and identify treatment areas and treatment plans for that valley. Truckee has one as well. Town of Truckee has one. And so then those entities will secure grant funding. And the ironic thing about most of our grant funding in this state is it comes from the cap and trade carbon market. That's what pays us to go thin forests. So in some sense, it's sort of working. Then they'll put out tenders or sole source to known vendors that can do the work. There's being a timber contractor and living here. On a side note, I'd just like to say that lowest bid is not always best value. If you give the lowest bid, you're not necessarily going to make the neighbors happy. So there's things that cost a lot more money to do in a way that's sensitive to the community, sensitive to the recreation, sensitive to the people that are looking at it every day, versus let's just go hammer out and thrash a whole bunch of acres and say we got a bunch of acres done and look how little it cost us. So, yeah.
I forget it's Prop D, or there was a local prop measure T, yeah, because that up to the summit we can see a lot of impact. Good work being done there, combined with there's some meadow restoration work. I think it's another funding source, and the ski areas throwing down as well on their land. It's often a combination of groups kind of get together.
As far as like how does the biomass reduction calculation integrate with stuff like community wildfire protection plans? It doesn't. There's no calculation. There's no methodology that links those two things in particular. The other thing to think about is for a given area, there's a difference between rearranging biomass in the forest, mastication work, stuff like that, and removal of biomass as far as which one affects the right level of fuel reduction and risk reduction for the given area. So it's kind of it's sort of an individual call for wherever you are, and that's where CAL FIRE does administer a pretty good program statewide for how the CWPP process comes together, and then how projects and sub-projects under that come to play. Newsom's more recent notice of exemption is allowing a lot of work to go ahead, but only if it's paired with some sort of grant fund. So other than the insurance agency, the state is pretty much the only person putting money into private land fire reduction.
Mastication, it's a lot of the people say, oh, we'll just go masticate these trees and it'll make it all great. Well, mastication, like Matt was saying, it's just rearranging the fuel. I mean, you go masticate some stand that you should have taken all that fuel out of there, it's going to burn, and it's going to burn hot, and it's going to kill everything that's there because those root systems get cooked from the mastication. I mean, you got to deal with the trees. You got to get the forest back to a state where it can have a symbiotic relationship with fire, because fire is going to come. It is inevitable. These forests will burn. That is what they are made to do. It's what they've done before humans were here. So it is inevitable.
I think we're going to land with our last question over there. Sam.
Cool. Yeah. Less technical question, kind of a more personal one for you, Dave. You mentioned like the hoopla, I think you said, in the community maybe around last year in reference to the project. Like I know I saw some stuff on Facebook and like next door.
Yeah.
You mentioned you grew up in the area, you lived in Olympic Valley, like you had a project in your backyard. I know I had feelings about it when I lived in the valley. So like I'm just curious how it was for you, like proposing this project. You know all these benefits, but you do hear the people that live right there with probably some concerns or comments that are valid, probably some that aren't. So like how was it just like navigating that?
Well, there's the ones that are always, we love what you do. We love what you do in the forest. We think you do an excellent job, and we think this project is great, and just not here.
Don't do it here. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well then where? Well, the Forest Service should just give you, 200 acres somewhere up the road. And I'm like, well, last time I checked, acts of Congress are kind of challenging, because that's what that would take. So, there's the practicalities of, we have 124 acres and we're going to take up 10 of it. And we've put the facility as far away from the neighbors as we can get it. And we're going to pave the road and widen the road and give them a fire hydrant, which they don't have. And, their properties are zoned the same as my property, and it's zoned appropriately. And we went through the process, and we have spent a exorbitant amount of funds designing and doing all the various studies with all the consultants to control all the sound and all the emissions and design the buildings to be as least impactful for sound as possible to the neighborhood and light and everything else. Like, I pride myself on being a good steward to the land, and I pride myself on being a good neighbor to whomever I am living around or operating around. So, the neighbors in Klondike, they did a valiant job of voicing their concerns, whether I agree with them or not, or, there was a lot of hyperbole that went along with a lot of the things that went on the internet. And I actively do not read things like that, because I think it's all a bunch of useless things that really just hurt society. So I think it's, in the long run, it's fine. In the long run, it is what it is. It's, yeah, no one wants a sawmill or a industrial facility built, a quarter mile from their house, but it was also a sawmill a quarter mile from their houses for 100 years before the one at Hobart Mills got taken down. And Klondike Flat, where these houses are, where our facility is being built now, was where the brothels and bars were, because Hobart was dry. So, things change. It is, things change.
Well, I think at this point, I'd like to get a round of applause for our speakers, a lot of great questions. And I'm sure nobody's rushing out of here, so I'm sure they'd be interested in entertaining some of your questions. I think that the way that David landed us is that change is hard, and change is something that we want to manage productively. And one of our goals here at the Lift is to pull together people that are solving difficult community problems. So thank you all for coming out, and thank you for being here. Awesome.